Welcome to another episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Player Ranks. In this series, we rank various Yu-Gi-Oh! Themes based on your comments and suggestions. Come back every tier list Tuesday to see an all-new installment of this series. Alright, what's up guys? We are back today with another tier list. Today we are doing Vehicroids, the Cyrus archetype. But before that, do you want to make your Master Duel experience a lot better?
Are you ready to take your Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel play experience to a new level? The Untapped GG Companion is here for you. Use the deck tracker to know exactly what cards you have in your deck, and to go over any cards you aren't familiar with yet by hovering over them. It instantly updates when you draw a card, and automatically hides if you check your extra deck or graveyard. This is the perfect tool to help you master a new deck. The Untapped GG Companion also lets you import decks directly into the game in seconds. Copy any YDK or YDKE deck string, create a new deck in game, click the Start Auto Import button, and let us take the wheel. Once the duel is over, check your win rate on your personal stats page. Brag among your friends and share your decks so they can import them into the game too. Start your path to master today by downloading the Untapped GG Companion at ygom.untapped.gg.
Alright, we're back. So, one thing I forgot to mention a lot, there is a playlist now for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Player Ranks videos. There's a playlist, you can just put them on and you can watch all of them simultaneously over and over and over. But today we are doing roids, or Vehicroid. So this is very selectively the Cyrus Truesdale deck. This was actually the first of the GX decks that I ever made or got, because at the beginning this was actually one of the better GX decks. It came out right away. There was a starter deck for it. It was better than Elemental Heroes at the time, because Elemental Heroes took so many resources and didn't really do much. It was better than Ancient Gears, because they couldn't be like summoned, they couldn't be special summoned, so that was like a huge restriction on them. It was better than the Cyber Angels. It was definitely better than not Cyber Angels, but before, I remember Alexis Rhodes, she had a different deck. It was like a fusion-based cyber skater deck. It was not that good. But surprisingly, other than Cyber Dragons, this was actually one of the best GX like TV show archetypes. And at the time, I thought it was really good. But looking back and seeing everything in full view, this is one of the worst archetypes to ever be released. And I have tried to play it over the years, and it has trouble beating anything, and I mean anything. So today we're going to discuss it, and hopefully we can maybe get to understand why this deck is so terrible. So first things first, we've got Gyroid. This card is one of those cards where at the time it was actually quite good, but now it's just unplayable. It's garbage. Basically what this does is, I'm going to put it in D tier because that's where most of these cards deserve to be. Basically what this card does is, when this card is, I can scroll past S tier. That's probably not going to be anything in S tier. What this card does is, if it was to be destroyed by battle once, it's not destroyed once per turn. So let's say this got attacked, can't be destroyed, then your opponent would have to attack it again to destroy it. At the time, this really wasn't a bad effect. Like we're talking 10 years, not even 10 years, more than 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago is 2013. So this was probably good like 16, 17 years ago. This card would have been decent, not good, decent. Spirit Reaper was better, Marshmallow was better. Like, there's so many better cards than this card. But yeah, it was just kind of a decent effect in a machine deck to have. So it was just like an okay deck, okay card. The other okay card at the time was Dragonoid. I can put this probably in D tier. I mean in C tier without really making too big of a fuss. Basically what this card did was, it was probably the best Roid at the time. When this battled an opponent's monster, it destroyed it automatically. So a defense position monster. So you attack a defense position monster, doesn't matter what it is, card effect automatically destroys it. I believe it's at the start of damage step or after. I believe it's at the start of damage step. It just destroys automatically. So if you have a flip effect monster, it doesn't even flip. It just blows up. So if you ever played the video game, you've seen the animation. It just kind of blows up your opponent's monster. So at the time, this was actually pretty cool because it was an out to anything. It was out to Spirit Reaper, Marshmallow, any flip effect. It was just good at the time. So at the time, this card was actually quite nice. And that's about it. Those are all of the cards that were good at the time. Oh, and I forgot, Mixroid is actually a good card. It still holds up to this day. Basically, this card, when it's summoned, not once per turn, it can let you add 2 Roid cards, 2 Roid monsters back to your hand. Not once per turn, on any kind of summon, normal or special summon. So either way, this will let you add that back. Those effects are actually quite good. So I would say that it's probably in B tier. Again, it's not once per turn, but it just does it automatically. And those are the only cards at the time that were usable in any way. The rest of the roids were just a disaster. We're going to go through them one by one here. Next is Rescueroid. Rescueroid is a level 6 monster, meaning it's a 1 tribute monster, but there's other ways to summon it. You can summon it off the Mixroid, stuff like that. At the time when it came out, there was literally no other way to summon it. You had to tribute summon this thing. But it's things like Mixroid can summon it. But basically what this card does is you can... Wonder Garage can summon it too if it's destroyed. But basically, well, no, I can't, right? It's a level 4 or lower monster, so I can't even summon it. Mixroid is the only way to really summon it. What it basically does is one of your Roid monsters is destroyed by battle, you can add it back to your hand. And that's about all it does. And you have to remember, your monster has to be destroyed by battle. So your opponent has to look at your board and go, I'm going to destroy that monster. The one that you can add back, I'm destroying that monster. I'm not going to attack the 1 tribute, 1600 attack Rescueroid. Now I'm going to attack something else. Like, that's how bad this card is. Your opponent has to be a moron. It goes in F tier. It's a 1 tribute. Its effect isn't like terrible, except your opponent has to destroy it by battle, so it's kind of dumb. Next is Decoyroid. This is like a reverse marauding captain. This card's a disaster. It's another kind of like F tier. A lot of these cards are going to be F tier because this archetype is very bad. Basically what this card does is your opponent can only attack a Decoyroid. They can't attack anything else. So it's like, again, it's like reverse marauding captain. With marauding captain, your opponent, if you have 2 marauding captains, your opponent basically can't attack. With this thing, if you have 2 of these, your opponent just can attack both of them. It just can't attack other cards that you control. So I don't even see how that really benefits. On top of that, this card is a wind. And because there are wind roid monsters, we're talking about speed roids, they intertwine sometimes. So Konami goes out of their way to prevent you within this archetype from searching wind roid monsters. So Mixroid, which is one of the better cards in the archetype, doesn't let you summon a wind roid monster, so you can't even summon this. And Dragonoid doesn't let you search this, so you can't search this and you can't summon it. And for some reason, this is a wind monster. It's a car on the ground. How is this a wind monster? Why is this a wind monster? It just, all it does is just nerf the card. Why is this a wind monster? It's a radio controlled car on the floor. Who came up with this? So yeah, this card is just terrible. Ambulance Roid is really not like that bad. I'm going to put it in C tier. Basically what this card does is if one of your Roids is added from, I believe from your graveyard to your hand, you can special summon it. That's actually not bad. Not once per turn. If you can add it back in any way, it's actually pretty good. Alright, next is Jet Roid. This is another bad one. If this card, which is like 1200 attack, all of their stats always suck. If this card is targeted for an attack, specifically this card, you can activate a trap card from your hand. Now, you have to be targeted by an attack. Your opponent knows that this is the effect of the card. It's not like it's hidden away somewhere. So if your opponent attacks this, then you can activate, like, for example, a Mirror Force from your hand. This is another card that was in the show. I think Cyrus used it against... I don't remember who Cyrus used it against, but I remember him using this specific thing, and I remember Jaden was like, you could have done this. But this is like... yeah, this is what the card does. It's just not... It's not good. It wasn't good then, and it's not good now in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just not a good card, unfortunately. Next is Steamroid. Steamroid, I'd say, at the time when this was released, wasn't that bad. Probably say it's like, well, if we're going by today's standards, it's a D tier card. Basically what this does, and when it attacks, it gains 500, and when it gets attacked, it loses 500. Which, at the time, this is 1800 attack, it becomes 23, which is really not that bad for the time, but modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! That just doesn't help anything whatsoever. It's just a weak, it's just a 2300 attack monster. At the time it was cool, right? Because it was like, it had all this attack and you could just normal summon at 23. Cool at the time. Now it's just a disaster. Cycroid, this is going to surprise you. I'm putting this in C tier. I'm putting this in C tier because the stats on this suck, and you would think that this card is absolute garbage, and it is absolute garbage. The stats do suck, and it is absolute garbage. But the issue is, but the great thing about it is that it's a normal monster, and there's an inherent advantage to being a normal monster in an archetype. So the reason there's an inherent advantage is because you can use cards like Unexpected Die to special summon this directly from your deck. And then you have fusion material for fusions that you make your Roid fusion materials. You have, you have materials on board because you could throw this thing out onto the field. You have cards like Painful Decision, which basically lets you add a cyroid, and then it lets you send a cyroid, and then that sets up for the Mixroid plays, because if you can, send summon, it basically gives you a little more utility. It fills the graveyard up, and the Mixroid has a better opportunity to use some of its effects. So that is actually quite good about this. Next is another terrible card. So specific. Basically what this card does is if one of your spawn trap cards is targeted by a card that would destroy, I believe it's a spell too, that would destroy a spell or trap card, you can discard a card and then negate it. That's it. It essentially stops Mystical Space Typhoon. Has nothing to do with Roids in any other way. It just simply stops Mystical Space Typhoon. And it needs you to discard, and it needs you to have this bonehead on the field. Yeah, it's just embarrassing. I don't even know what to say. It's just so bad. Next is Truckroid. I'd probably say this is in like D tier. Basically what this card does is you attack your opponent's monster. If this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, this is a level 4 monster with 1000 attack, 2000 defense. When this monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, this dude is 1000 attack. When he destroys a monster by battle, you can equip that monster to this card, and then it gains attack equal to the monster that's equipped. Cool. Yeah, that second effect is actually kind of cool because the monster never really gets removed, so it can't float. You attach it to this card, which is nice. But the issue is it's just so damn weak. Now you have the Megaroid City, which is the field spell, which can flip attack and defense, so you can make it 2000, but it's still not worth it because it's still, generally speaking, fairly weak. Next is Dragonoid. This card's actually pretty decent. I'm going to put it in B tier because it's stuck in this archetype, so it's never going to be really good. It has multiple effects. So effect number 1 is once per turn in the graveyard, you can count it as a dragon monster. Now you're probably wondering, what does that have to do with anything, right? Watch Season 4 of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. You'll know very quickly why that's on there. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a reason why this card turns itself into a dragon. So that's effect number 1. Then it has a second effect where you can discard this card from your hand, and then you can do one of two effects. Effect number 1 is you can either make it so your opponent can't respond to your fusion summons for that turn. That effect is fine, right? It's not bad. And then the second effect is you can discard this and then you can add one non-wind Roid monster. So that is the reason they put that, is again to avoid speed Roids from being added, because they are all machine Roid monsters. Now, here's the issue. A lot of the good monsters that are Roids are wind. Now, some make sense, right? Jetroid being wind, it's a jet. It's wind. Gyroid, it's a helicopter. It's wind. Why is a radio-controlled car a wind monster? Why? And this card doesn't matter because it sucks anyway. But Mixroid, which is one of the other good monsters in this archetype, so I'm going to put it up here, probably the best monster in the archetype, is also a wind monster. Dude, this is a cement truck. Why is this a wind monster? Just why in the world is this a wind monster? It's a cement truck. Who comes up with this stuff? Why would you make this a wind monster? It's embarrassing. I don't know what to say. It's just embarrassing. I'm just in shock. I don't even know why that's the case. Why is a cement truck? There's nothing about a cement truck that should be aligned with the attribute of wind. It mixes cement. It's ground stuff. It's shocking. And then Mixroid is actually a good card. Basically what it does is you contribute a machine monster, and then you can summon any Roid monster in the game except a wind Roid monster. Which again, you can't summon Gyroid, you can't summon Jetroid, you can't summon Decoy, and you can't summon Dragonoid with the other good wind monsters. So the only other good target is usually Expressroid. So they somehow nerfed all of this in some way, which is really frustrating. But it can summon any other Roid monster, but it can summon Expressroid, and then Expressroid can add back the Mixroid and the Dragonoid. So you can do a few cool little combos there. So yeah, I'd say that's effect number 1. And then it has a second effect where you can banish materials from the graveyard machine monsters to summon a Roid monster from your extra deck, and then all you have to do is just banish the same amount of levels that the monster has, and then during the end phase you destroy that monster. So you can essentially, it's a way to cheat out all of these larger Roid monsters, the Vehicroid monsters from your extra deck, as you banish stuff out of your graveyard, and it gives you reason to play things like Dragonoid and stuff like that. But it's just another kind of like summoning, another way to summon them essentially. Yeah, but essentially, and the other thing that's kind of like it messes with some of the other issues of the deck. So like Mixroid is one of the best cards in the archetype because it's not once per turn. It can add back cards not once per turn. So Mixroid is really good. Also, I forgot to mention, Mixroid is actually a target for machine duplication. So it's actually pretty easy to accumulate advantage with Mixroid sometimes, depending on the things that you do. But Mixroid, yeah, you have to banish the materials out of the graveyard. When you banish the materials, you can never add them back with Mixroid. So it's kind of like pointless. Shocking. I don't know why they do this stuff. And then we've got, next is Roid. He's another terrible one. You can target a face down card your opponent controls and look at it. That's it. That's it. It's a 1200 attack monster, level 4. All it does is look at a face down card, and you put it back face down. Oh, look. Oh, you have Mirror Force. All right. Like, what's the point of that? What are you going to look at their face down card? Oh, now I know I'm going to lose. It's just a terrible card. Armoroid is not a good card. Basically, when it's tribute summon, it banishes all small and trap cards. That effect isn't bad theoretically, but it is a level. Well, it's a 2 tribute monster. Now it goes in C tier, and the reason it goes in C tier is because you can use Urgent Schedule with it. Urgent Schedule, if you don't know, it lets you add, I believe it's like a level 5, it lets you special summon a level 5 or higher machine, and then like a level 5 or lower machine to your field, Earth Machine. This happens to have those stats where it can be special summoned to your field, so you can summon this and Mixroid onto the field, and then kind of go off like that. That's actually not too bad, because you fill up your field with machines, and then you can fusion summon, tribute them for Mixroid. You can add them back with Mixroid. Like, there's so many things that you can do. You just kind of put them into place. So that is actually quite good. In terms of its stats, it's good, but in terms of its effect, it's just kind of lackluster because you're not going to tribute summon it. Next is UFO. This is like D tier. This card is horrific, but the only reason it's here in D tier is because in D tier rather than the reason it's in D tier rather than other tiers is because it has a fusion, which is UFO fighter, so at least it has some purpose. But the problem with this card is it's a level 6 monster. Level 6 UFO Roid. Level 6, at least it's a light. At least it's a light and not a wind. But it's a level 6 monster that basically has the same effect as Shining Angel. Like, essentially, it lets you, when this card's destroyed by battle, it lets you summon a machine monster from your deck that's 1500 or lower. That's all it does. It just lets you summon a 1500. Like, it's the same thing as Mother Grizzly. It's the same thing as what else is there? Giant Rat. Like, this is essentially what this card does. But because it's a Roid, it's level 6, 1200 attack. It's weaker than Mother Grizzly. It has more levels than Mother Grizzly. It's a 1 tribute monster, and all it does is float into another machine when it's destroyed by battle. You talk about slow. That is slow. That is really bad. Now, interestingly enough, you can use Shining Angel to float into UFO Roid, which you can do, but like, why would you do it? Like, there's so many better targets with the Shining Angel. Like, I don't even understand why they made this such a high level monster and why they made its stats so bad. Like, there's nothing about it that makes sense to me. Why did they do this? Now, like I said, the only thing that I will give this card is that it has its own special fusion. So outside of that, this card is just terrible. Statistically speaking, effect wise, it's so outdated. I don't know why this is where it is. Next is Stealth Roid. So basically what this card does is at the end of the battle phase, it's another F tier. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you can destroy, you have to actually, it's mandatory. You have to target a spawn trap card on the field and destroy it. Mandatory. So if only you have spawn trap cards, you're losing them. But also, not only is this mandatory, but this effect can only be activated if you control a Roid monster, which means that your Roids would have had to survive the battle phase, including this card. Not including this card. So your opponent would have to go to battle phase, attack over this, and then somehow not be able to attack over the rest of these bums, and then another one of these has to survive, and this has to be destroyed by battle in that turn. At the end of that battle phase, you can go, okay, I want to destroy one spawn trap cards. One single spawn trap, one single spell or trap card. I get to now destroy. I mean, it's just terrible. You can't make this stuff up. How do they make cards so bad? It's just a mess. And next is Submarine Roid. It's only in D tier because it's better than all of these, because these are so bad that this actually isn't that bad. This card basically can attack directly. Any battle damage it does is halved. It's 800 attack, so you can only attack with 400. Watch out. I mean, it's just, you do, what is that, 1/20th of your opponent's life points per attack? I mean, come on. Come on. 1/20th of, actually, yeah, 1/20th of an opponent's attack points. 1/20th of their life points every time this thing attacks. And during the end of the, after this card battles, this card is changed to defense mode. Now, it does have more defense than attack, so at least that's good about the card. It's 800 attack, 1800 defense, so when it switches to defense, it's actually not that bad. So this card is really not like terrible, but it's like, so again, it's the problem with this archetype isn't that some of these cards were bad at one point, it's that they're so outdated now. Like gyroid was decent at one point, Steamroid was decent, Roid I would even argue was actually maybe even good, Submarine Roid was a decent card, but a lot of these cards are so outdated, and a lot of them were even bad then, which is kind of the problem with them. All right, Vehicroid Connection Zone isn't bad. I would say for a fusion card, it's probably like a B tier. It's really not that bad. It's really not that great. It's basically what this card does is it's basically like polymerization, where you can use cards from your hand and field as material. So normal fusion card, but you have to use it for a Vehicroid card, and then the Vehicroid card basically can be destroyed by card effects, and its effects can't be negated. Now, a lot of the effects of the Vehicroid cards are actually not that good. And Vehicroids are only exclusive to certain cards. So Steam Gyro is not a Vehicroid. Cycroid is not a Vehicroid. It's specifically things like Super Vehicroid, Stealth Union, and Mobile Base, and Jumbo Drill. Like, only those cards are included in the Vehicroid name. Is this a Vehicroid? I believe this is the battle Vehicroid thing is also a Vehicroid. The ambulance is not a Vehicroid. So there's half of the fusions don't even operate with this card. It's only certain cards that even work with the Vehicroid fusion, Vehicroid Connection Zone. But basically it makes them so their effects can't be negated, can't be destroyed by card effects. It's not the worst, it's not the best. I think it's a decent fusion card. Next is Megaroid City. I'd say this is probably like an A tier card. It's one of the better cards in the entire archetype. Yeah, but this card's actually pretty good. It lets you destroy one of your cards in order to add any Roid card in the game to your hand. It didn't say non-wind, it doesn't say any of that. So you can actually add things like Mixroid and Dragonoid, and vehicle. It even lets you add the spawn trap cards, lets you add the counter trap, which is actually kind of good. So it lets you add some really good cards. So it lets you do that. So it's kind of like a Dragonic diagram effect, where you target a card you control, destroy it, and then you get to use the effect. Now the issue is, again, like, this deck doesn't have a lot of cards that benefit from being destroyed. So it's not like you're playing True Dracos. It's not like you're playing what are they called? Metal Foes. Like, why does this card have to destroy a card in order to do something? The only card that it has synergy with is Wonder Garage. Like, why does this have to destroy a card in order to do something? It's such a weird cost for a deck that doesn't benefit from having cards destroyed. And I think that's one of the bigger issues with this archetype, is it doesn't really feel like an archetype. It feels like a bunch of random cards with a bunch of random effects that are just happen to be together. It's like an adoptive family. It's like everyone's just together, but no one really has anything to do with anybody. None of these cards have anything to do with anything. They're just a bunch of machines with Roid in their name that have generic effects. It's kind of astounding. Now, it has another effect where if one of your Roid monsters battles, you can send a Roid monster from your deck to the graveyard and then switch the attack and defense of the monster, essentially. So in certain cases it helps. So Truckroid, for example, it helps because he's 2000 defense. It helps with cards like Stealth Union because Stealth Union, no, I'm sorry, not Stealth Union. mobile base because it has 0 attack and 5,000 defense, so it actually helps with this card. But with certain cards it actually helps because it flips the attack and defense, and then it has another effect where basically if you use any of these effects, it locks you into fusion summons for the rest of the turn, which is obviously something you're going to have to deal with. But I mean, it's dumb that that is on there, because this came out right as Lynx came out and we were in Master Rule 4, so you needed to have ways to special summon Lynx first and then go into fusion. So having this lock happen when this card came out was just astounding to me. Like, to nerf this card deck as much as they already did. But yeah, it basically prevents you from going into the good Lynx, like good machine Lynx, for no reason, because it's not like anybody was going to splash this into any other archetypes. Why would you want to search any of them? What Roid card are you going to search in another archetype? Like, are you really going to play Metal Foes and then activate? Like, what are you going to do? Play Fire Kings, pop one of your Fire King cards, and then search a Roid card? Like, be realistic. What Roid card would you even search? Like, why is that nerf on there? Like, why do they go through the trouble of overly nerfing shitty archetypes? Like, this already sucks. Why would you make it even worse? You're locked into fusions. Great, now you can't go into Link Monsters. And for what? Because you wanted to search Drillroid in Fire Kings? Are you really going to do that? I mean, it's too much, even for me. D tier, Wonder Garage. There's another card that kind of sucks. Basically, if this card's destroyed, wall face down, you can special summon a Roid monster from your hand. It's level 4 lower. That's it. That's all it does. The only reason it's in D tier, and I'm putting it in F tier, I'm not even going to put it in D tier. The only synergy it really has is you can use Mega Roid City to pop it and then summon a Roid from your hand, and then you can search a Roid card. So it's not even, the crazy thing about this card is it needs to be destroyed wall face down, and it doesn't even like it doesn't even plus. It's not even plus. It just summons a card from your hand. It doesn't search a card. It doesn't add back a card from the graveyard. It just summons a card from your hand. You can just do that. I mean, it's astounding. All right, next up is Mixroid Call. This card's pretty good. Like, I have nothing like this card. There's nothing really negative to say about it for the most part. So basically, it's a counter trap. If you control a Vehicroid monster, which is like the fusions essentially of the archetype, if you control one of those and your opponent activates a card effect, monster spell trap, you can negate it, and then send all cards with the same name from your opponent's deck to the graveyard, which isn't objectively even like a good thing to do, right? It's not, because they activate a tier limit on field and you activate this and then they have to send 3 more tier limits. Like, doesn't even like benefit them. It's not always an inherently beneficial card to activate or negate. It is in some cases, but it's not always inherently beneficial. So in a lot of cases you can even like get bricks out of their deck. So if you activate, like if they try to Nibiru you and you activate Vehicroid Call, now you just got rid of all their Nibirus in their deck, so they don't have to brick into another Nibiru. Like, it actually might even benefit them to have you activate this card. So that's effect number 1. Effect number 2 is that you can banish this card from the graveyard and then add a Roid monster from your graveyard back to your hand. That is actually a pretty decent effect. I have nothing negative to say about that. It even works with Ambulance Roid wherever that is, because if you add it back, you can immediately special summon. So that effect actually not that bad. Ambulance Roid works both with Express Roid and Emergency Roid, but it's just kind of a weak monster. It doesn't do much. So, and your monsters are you're locked into fusions, so special summoning monsters doesn't even benefit you, because Vehicroid Connection Zone lets you fuse from your hand, and your other way of fusing is Mixroid, which uses monsters out of the graveyard. If you try to link them away, the Megaroid City locks you into fusion summons only, so you can't even like link them away. So there's a bunch of synergy in this deck as usual. And yeah, this card is like, it's a good card, but it's just trapped in this horrific archetype, unfortunately. Next is Supercharge. This doesn't have Roid in its name, so it's not searchable, but it's not a terrible card. I'd say it's probably in C tier. Basically what this card does is when it's attacked, when one of your Roid monsters is attacked, you can activate this card, draw 2 cards. That's it. It just lets you draw 2 cards. If you're playing a control build of this, which I've tried 2 different builds, recent builds of this. Obviously, 20 years ago, not 20, but 15 years ago, this is a very different deck with very different goals. But if you're building this deck in the modern sense, you have one of 2 ways to build it. You can either A, build a control deck, in which case you play a bunch of trap cards, including a bunch of floodgates, like Rivalry, not goes in, because look, a bunch of different attributes. So basically like rivalry, a bunch of random trap cards, and you have Supercharge, so when your opponent attacks, you get to draw into hand traps and more trap cards and stuff like that. That's one way to play the deck. The other way to play the deck is to go second, and then you have things like Urgent Schedule to summon Armoroid and Expressroid. You have things like machine duplication for the Expressroid, stuff like that when you're going second to kind of overwhelm your opponent, although you're probably not going to overwhelm them with roids. It's still to the best of your ability. If you're playing the trap build, this is probably not a bad card. If you're playing kind of like the going second build, you're not going to draw it. Also, it doesn't have roid in its name, so it's not searchable with Megaroid City. And this is the only card in the archetype that searches at all, and Terraforming's at 1 and this card's at 3. So essentially, this is the only way to search any of the spell and trap cards, and this card's just not searchable at all. So whether you draw it or not, it just kind of happens. But it's not once per turn, so I guess you can activate it multiple times if you draw multiple. But again, it requires your opponent to go into the battle phase with your roid cards and then attack, and then you get the draw. So it's really kind of slow. Next is Cycroid. This card isn't bad at all. I wish Instant Fusion was at more than 1, because some of the like, for example, the mobile base requires a fusion roid monster, and unfortunately sometimes it requires its materials are a roid monster and a fusion roid monster. So if you had Instant Fusion, you can just Instant Fusion out Cycroid, and Cycroid basically it's a decent card. I'd say it's probably like a C tier. It just basically can attack twice. If you make this off of like I think it's just 2 machine monsters too. It's pretty generic. Yeah, this card is just 2 machine monsters. It's really 2 machine monsters with the same name. It can attack twice. If you use Power Bond, you just make this, and I believe it comes out like 3,400 attack or something like that. So it can just attack twice, 3,400 attack. It can actually end games. You can also Instant Fusion this card out, which is nice because it's level 5, and then you can use that to fuse into other things, which is really cool. So overall, the card is actually like fairly good. I would almost even put it in B tier. I remember this is a card that people used to use in Cyber Dragons before Cyber Dragons got some of their newer support, because again, it's just any 2 machine monsters with the same name. That's it. It can be any of these roids. It can be 2 Expressroids, honestly. It can be 2 Dragonoids, 2 Mixroids. It doesn't matter. Just 2 machine monsters with the same name. So the card's actually really easy to summon, and it can help you end games, especially if you power bond off of it, because 2 attacks, 34, it can actually do some significant damage. Almost game just right there. And again, Instant Fusion is something you can do. Next, I'll just quickly go into Steam Gyroid. This is kind of another odd card. It's actually worse than the combination of itself. So to make it, you need to use Steamroid and Gyroid. This is one that Cyrus made very often in the show. This can't be destroyed by battle once. This, when it attacks, gains 500, so it becomes 2,300 attack. This card is a non-effect fusion monster that has 2,200 attack, so it's actually weaker than the Steamroid when the Steamroid attacks. And this is a fusion with another monster, which is just baffling. I don't even know what to say about that. How do you fuse 2 monsters and the monster you get is actually weaker than the 2 monsters you fused? It's just unbelievable. I don't know who was sitting around thinking of this. Now, because it sucks so much, there's actually sometimes there's this weird like graph in Yu-Gi-Oh where a card can suck so much that it sucks so much that it actually becomes a good thing. So in the case of Gyroid, like I said, it gains the normal monster support. In the case, or Cyroid I should say, in the case of Steam Gyroid, it's actually a C tier, and the reason it's a C tier is because it sucks so badly and it's a non-effect fusion monster. You can actually summon it off of the Instant Fusion, not Instant Fusion, the other fusion card, Ready Fusion. You can summon it off of Ready Fusion because you just activate Ready Fusion and it's a level 6 or lower fusion monster with no effect. You can just instantly summon it out, and then you can use it for a mobile base. You can use it for all of the other roid stuff, right? You can tribute it for Mixroid and then summon another thing, fill up the graveyard, and then Mixroid will let you cheat out like the level 10s, the level 9s, stuff like that. It can actually benefit you quite a bit. So yeah, it can actually be somewhat usable in the deck, especially if you use Ready Fusion. So it's significantly better than you would think that it is. All right, next is Super Vehicroid Mobile Base. I'd say this is probably like, I don't think that's A tier. I'd probably say it's like bottom of B tier. It's an okay card. It's another kind of like a lot of the new Roid support was released at the beginning of the Link era, so you can read it and figure out what's going on. But basically what this card does is it lets you target one of your opponent's monsters, and then you can special summon a Roid monster with attack less than that monster. So essentially You know, let's say your opponent has from your deck or extra deck, so it's kind of cool. But again, if from the extra deck, you know, if you're trying to cheat out the extra deck ones, you have to hope that your opponent summons a big monster. But if they summon a big monster, that's actually bad for you because it's more difficult to get over a bigger monster. So it's kind of it's one of those things where this card is really only good going second. Its other effect is that it can basically target one of your Roid cards and then return it to the hand, and it allows this card to be placed where that Roid monster was before. Now the problem with that is the reason that effect's on there is again because of Master Rule 4. The whole point is you can only summon in the fusion monsters in the extra monster zone, otherwise you needed link monsters. So this card has that effect for Master Rule 4, but it literally has no implication whatsoever on the modern game. It's just straight minus. It makes you return one of your own monsters to move something over. It has no implication or benefit whatsoever for you at all. Like, there's nothing to it. And this card was actually even worse when it came out, because if you were going to summon a monster from the extra deck, so let's say you wanted to target one of your opponent's monsters and then summon a monster from the extra deck with attack lower than that monster, you would actually have to have a link monster first, which you can't do in this deck because Mixroid City locks you into fusions, and then you summon this, and then you activate that effect and then summon in a card from the extra deck. So this card used to be even worse before, which is incredibly shocking, but still, it's just kind of a lackluster boss monster. And then it has 0 attack and 5,000 defense, which that's not, I don't know why it has 0 attack and 5,000 defense. I think it should have been 5,000, 5,000, but you can use Mixroid City to switch the attack and defense and make it attack 5,000, but after it battles, it's stuck in attack mode and its attack goes back to 0. So there's just so much goofiness with this card. Like, I don't know what they were thinking. It has so many restrictions, so many effects that aren't even beneficial in any way anymore, but it's still one of the best fusion monsters, unfortunately, to summon in this entire archetype. It's just horrific. All right, next up is Super Vehicroid Stealth Union. This card's probably like a C tier. It's kind of outrageous. It requires 4 fusion materials, specific: Truckroid, Struckroid, Stealthroid, Drillroid, and Expressroid. 4 specific fusion materials to make this card. And basically all that it does is it can target a monster on the field and then equip that card to this card. So it's kind of like Thousand Eyes Restrict. That's actually not like a bad effect. Steal a monster. It does target, but it still steals a monster. It's not bad. And then if this card's equipped with a monster, it can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. That effect is, again, not so bad. And then it has another effect where it does piercing. Again, not bad, right? Everything so far is not bad. Yes, you gave up a bunch of fusion material or cheated it out with Mixroid, but one of the two. You either did one of those two things to summon this card, and you essentially have almost like an Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, right? Like, it's almost like a kind of a good card. Except when this card attacks, its original attack is halved. Its original attack is halved. Why? Why? It's 3,600 attack. Why is this attack being halved? And you have to remember where this card... This was released in Light of Destruction. Light of Destruction is the same set that had the Lightsworns. It's the same set that had Honest. It's the same set that had Judgment Dragon. Like, dude, why is this card so nerfed? Like, why is you fused 4 monsters together to summon this piece of crap, and it cuts its own attack in half when it attacks? Why? Like, why? And the crazy thing is Steamroid is the card that cuts its attack when it's attacked. But this card, just out of nowhere, just has one of the random, like, nerfs to itself for no reason. Like, this archetype is full of the most, like, overly stupidly nerfed cards for no reason. Now, the reason this card is in C tier is because you can cheat it out. You can summon off the mobile base. You can summon it off the Mixroid, so you're not actually summoning it off the stupid, unbelievable fusion requirement of 4 monsters. You can cheat it out. So it's not actually that bad because you're going to cheat it out regardless, but all that considered, it's still frustrating to even think about how terrible this card is. Not terrible, like how just unbelievable, like unnecessarily nerfed this card is, when it's really not all of that great. But the artwork for this card actually looks really cool. Next is UFO Fighter. I'd say I'm going to put this... I'd say it's probably like in D tier. This is the only reason to play like a UFO Roid in any way. I'm going to put it next to UFO Roid. Basically what this card does is you fuse a UFO Roid plus any warrior monster in the game, and the attack becomes a combined attack of UFO Roid and that warrior monster. Now, is that good? It can be good, right? Polymerization, you can use any warrior monster, so you can use a hero like they did in the show, but you can also just use like Gate Guardian, and Gate Guardian is 3750 attack. You fuse that with the UFO Roid, that's like 4,000 something attack. It's really not that bad. It's 4,950 attack. That's not like a terrible attack stat off of just a polymerization and 2 monsters. Of course, it has no protection. It doesn't count as a Vehicroid. You can't summon it off the Vehicroid connection zone because, again, it doesn't count as a Vehicroid monster. It's called UFO Roid Fighter. So it's like decent in a certain way. Also, you don't trigger anything off the UFO Roid. And worst of all, you have to play the UFO Roid. So overall, I think it's just like an okay card, but it's definitely not that good. All right, next up, Super Vehicroid Jumbo Drill. This is a fusion of Steamroid. What's the other one? I know the Drill's in there, the Drill Roid's in there, and Submarine Roid. Basically, this card is okay. I put it in C tier too, just because, again, if I was actually had to summon these using the materials, this one is actually one of the least, like, some of the materials for this card aren't like that bad, right? Because it's Steamroid, Submarine Roid, Drill Roid, they're not that bad. At least you don't have to play like Stealth Roid or Jet Roid or any of the really bad ones. So in terms of material, it's not that bad. It's only 3 material compared to like the 4 materials on this, but you can cheat it out, so at least that's good. It's 3,000 attack, and the only thing it essentially does, it just does piercing. Whenever you see like a beak or a horn or a drill on any monster, anything with a pointy nose at the edge, for some reason they always do piercing, and this card is just like that. It just does piercing. It's 3,000 attack, 2,000 defense. It doesn't even benefit from having its attack and defense switch. It actually gets worse. So yeah, it's just a 3,000 attack piercing monster, but I guess you can cheat it out, so it's not that bad. All right, next up is Barbaroid, the Ultimate Battle Machine. Basically, I'm going to put this in like B tier because it's really not like that hard. It requires a lot of materials. I'd say it's probably like B or top of C, somewhere in that direction. But basically what it does, it requires 5 Roid monsters, generically any 5 Roid monsters. It doesn't have to be like this specific name and this specific card, any 5 Roid monsters. And basically what it does is you can't attack, or it can't do battle. It can't attack your opponent directly, but it can attack twice every battle phase, and it's 5,000 attack. And then when it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, it negates that monster, and then inflicts 1,000 to your opponent. It has no protection whatsoever, which is unfortunate. It has no other effect. It's just all battle phase stuff, and it's just kind of okay. Honestly, it's probably seed because it requires so many materials, and it is level 12. So you can cheat it with Mixroid, but you need to banish a lot of stuff. You banish 3 monsters at least, like level 4, and another level 4. You banish 3 level 4s, and you can get this thing out, which is kind of a lot to banish, if we're being honest. But yeah, I think overall it's just kind of like a decent card and a decent option. You're never going to summon it off the mobile base because your opponent's not going to control a 5,000 attack monster. And if they do, that thing is going to out this thing pretty easily because this thing doesn't do anything other than attack. So it's, unfortunately, again, it's just a little nerfed. It attacks twice, but it can't attack directly. So like, you put 5 monsters and a fusion spell into this card and it can't even attack directly. Like, this is the most overly nerfed archetype I've ever seen in my entire life. Every card has a drawback. Even the worst, like cards that shouldn't even have drawbacks, have drawbacks. Everything has a drawback. Everything has a cost. Everything has a like, the only thing this deck doesn't have is once per turns. That's the only thing. Like, okay, like some of the better cards have once per turns, but for the most part, that's like the entire deck is just full of nothing but drawbacks. Everything is a requirement. It's outrageous. All right, last card is Ambulance Rescue Roid. I'd say probably this is like a D tier card. It requires, obviously it's Ambulance Rescue Roid, so it requires the Rescue Roid plus the Ambulance Roid. Obviously, it requires those two. Wherever I put the Ambulance Roid. But basically, if your monster is destroyed by battle, it just gets special summoned back to your side of the field. Doesn't even have to be a Roid monster, just any monster. This card has to be fusion summoned, meaning you can't cheat it out with alternative measures, right? You can't do it. It has to be fusion summoned. So you can't use like the mobile base to summon this particular card, but for the most part, it's pretty much it's not really that useful. Like, if your monsters get destroyed by battle, then they can just destroy this, and then that's it. They don't have to worry about destroying that other monster by battle, and it's just a stupid card. Like, in theory, it's not that bad. It's like a Yugioh Guardian, but worse. Like, this card would be so much better if it attacked something and then took it, but no, it it brings back a monster that's already been destroyed. If it's already been destroyed, your opponent can just destroy it next time. Like, it's a weak monster more than likely. So yeah, it just combines the two effects, and again, it's a very specific fusion like the other ones. It's also not a Vehicroid, so you can't even use certain ways to cheat it out. Overall, I think this is just a very lackluster card. And that is the last card in the entire tier list. There is no S tier, and there's no S tier because this deck is terrible. Like, I don't even want to put these in A tier because they're like okay cards in a bad archetype, and I'm like, and naturally I just want to put something up here. But the reality is, I think this is the first archetype I've ever done where I didn't put an S tier, ever. This is the first time. I've never done that. There's not a single S tier. Because the archetype, like I said, it's a disaster. Every single card is doing something totally different. The best cards are 2 wind monsters, and the entire deck tries to prevent you from adding or summoning Roid wind monsters. Why in the world is a cement truck a wind monster? Can somebody explain that to me? Why is an RC car a wind monster? Like, why did they make this art? Why does this deck have so many restrictions, have so many costs, have so many, like, it's like it's like somebody broke into Konami and changed the text on these cards to make sure that they were bad. How can an archetype be this much of a disorganized mess? There's nothing redeemable here except for maybe these 2 cards, except for this like quadrant right here of cards. These are the only redeemable cards in the entire archetype. Everything else has drawbacks, unbelievable costs. Nothing here has protection. None of the big fusion monsters you pour all these resources in have any protections. Supercharge, this card that's on the artwork, doesn't even exist. It doesn't exist. Like, with all of the Roid cards, they don't even have a single car. Look at all these Roids. There's not one just regular car. It exists on this trap card, and this monster that's on here doesn't even exist. We don't even know what it is. Just an unnamed Roid monster that hasn't been made yet. So this is a card that needs like S tier level support. It needs 5 S tier level cards just to be playable. Not to be good, just to be playable. Because at this moment, and I've tried to play this deck about a week ago, I was like, let me try a few different builds. It went disastrously. I tried to play against a dual computer and I couldn't pull a fusion off. That's how terrible it was. Yeah, this deck is a disaster. It definitely needs help. If you have anything to chime in on that, let me know what you think this deck needs, because it definitely needs something. But as always, thank you for watching and have a great day, guys. La, 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 la.